Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Wednesday night, right? Wednesday night, December 4th, 2024. It's about 9:12 p.m. here, California time. Looking at the live seismograph stations here in California still show some elevated activity stirring up here across the West Coast. The latest here, a 3.1 in a series of earthquakes out here across the West Coast in the last 24 hours. This 3.1 coming in to the Ridgecrest area, just north here of Ridgecrest. About 3 miles deep or so in the area. This area has been having a little bit of uptick here in the last couple months, but we're noticing an uptick in the general activity out here across the West Coast as a whole lately. Quite a bit of movement going on here. In fact, if you look at the 2.5 map and above, well, this is quite elevated here, with a number of 2s, 3s, even some 4s there offshore of the Northern California area. Again, a pretty large uptick in earthquake activity going on here across California and the plate boundary. Movement into Nevada as well, with some 2s and 3s stirring up out there earlier this morning. A lot of inland activity happening out here away from the plate boundary. So we got that 3.1 right now, followed up by a 2-pointer a couple minutes later. Actually, it looks like we may be getting a little swarming going on there. So let's see. There is the 3.1 there on the China Lake station, followed up by the 2-pointer. Very small. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I'll lower the amplitude here a little bit, and you guys can see the 2-pointer coming in, following that 3.1 within the last few minutes. So we'll continue to watch that. It's really not just one area that's seen an elevated movement event out here today. It's all across the West Coast. And most of it appears to be on the North American side of the plate boundary. The plate boundary, of course, the San Andreas Fault. A lot of inland activity today indicating some strain, right? You build up the strain because of the two interactions, the interaction here between the two plates. And in this case is going to be the Pacific Plate to the west and the North American Plate here to the east. Also a little bit of movement here south around the Salton Sea area. No swarming going on down here for now. We'll continue to watch that. Over here across the Loma Linda area, a couple 2s stirring up there throughout the day today. This here is actually on the Pacific side of the plate boundary. Look at this activity stirring up here across the Garlock Fault shear zone. It looks like things are starting to get active out here. This is a region to watch because this can produce a big earthquake. Not only that, it can possibly trigger the San Andreas Fault here, or vice versa. A lot of strain built up here across the shear zone. It's nothing like what you would normally see here across the plate boundary. A lot of these fault systems run parallel. Say, for example, the San Jacinto Fault Zone, Elsinore Fault, and quite a few other fault systems here, San Diego Trough and whatnot, run parallel with the plate boundary. This here runs opposite of it, so a lot of strain builds up here across this bend area. And further down south here is the southern end of the San Andreas Fault, and that's capable of producing an 8.1. I don't recall the last time we've seen an earthquake here on the Garlock Fault. Let's go over and check that out real quick here. Just lighting up like crazy right now. I want to go over here and search the earthquake catalog and custom magnitudes. I want to go 5 point. What just happened there? 5.5 and above. And I just want to look here, excluding the Ridgecrest area back in 2019, July 4th, July 5th sequence there. I don't want to get that in the list here because it's going to show a lot of activity. I just want to search specifically here across the Garlock Fault shear zone eastward here. I don't want to extend too much over here. Let's just go ahead and check this out right about here. That covers it pretty much. We'll use this region and see what we got here historically. I want to take a look here. Got about 10 earthquakes here across that region. Almost looks like the most recent one is going to be a 5.7 back in 1992. outside the California city area. But I guarantee you the shear zone here is capable of producing much larger earthquakes than a 5.7. 6-pointer, that may be off of the Garlock Fault shear zone back in 1916. So not a whole lot of elevated earthquake activity here on that shear zone, which makes sense there because we really haven't seen any large-scale potential out here across the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault in over 300 years. So, maybe something's happened back there historically that is not up here on the map. But, I think obviously we can see a lot more larger quake activity than what's shown here on the map. So that's active today, showing up some elevated seismic activity, and we normally don't see any activity on there. And this many quakes here in the last 24 hours across that shear zone, a sign of elevated activity as a whole across the region. So continue to watch that. One earthquake right on the interchange here of the San Andreas Fault and the Garlock Fault shear zone. Was a little 1.2 from 7 o'clock this morning. Malibu area getting some movement as well with a 1.2. That was actually from last night, it looks like. Some movement further down south here. Didn't I mention that last night? If I remember right, we were looking at some elevated earthquake activity down in Baja, California, and I said keep an eye on areas north here because it looks like it may be migrating along the plate boundary. And sure enough, we've seen things elevate out here across the west coast since that update last night. Movement in Nevada as well. There's obviously many different fault systems out here inland on the North American plate, but a lot of strain building up here right now across this area. There was a 3.8 originally coming in as a 4-pointer in the Yerington area of Nevada. That got downgraded to a 3.8. A couple other smaller quakes in there as well across looks like a little separate fault system out there. And if you go back here last couple months, I've been watching my videos, we've been seeing a swarm of activity across western Nevada coinciding with the elevated activity here across California, just indicative there of the strain out here along the plate boundary. There was a lot of earthquake activity roughly about northwest of Las Vegas, all the way up through the Tonopah area, even around this little lake area right here, the Walker Lake. A lot of swarming taking place here when we've seen some elevated activity there across California. So that has halted there across western Nevada, but we're seeing newer areas get hit that have not had any swarming activity out here recently, like this 3.8 and a series of other earthquakes there in Nevada. So things are crunching and they're filling in. The question is how much strain can the plate boundary continue to handle out there across the west coast. Quite active. San Francisco area pretty quiet for now, not a whole lot going on. Underneath the Willows area, in between Maxwell and Willows. Maxwell sits down south, Willows up north here. We've seen a little bit of earthquake activity this morning. In fact, Missy Mimi's here, my beautiful fiance. She felt this earthquake. Felt it as a jolt. Not the first one here, but the second one, the 3.3. Even though these are relatively deep here, we're just outside the region here, outside of Chico, and she felt the 3.3. I didn't, but I was moving around. She felt it as a nice little jolt, and of course my parakeets went crazy. This right here, just indicative of overall strain pattern out here across the west coast, just like we're seeing down south, just on a larger scale. A lot of people think, well, how can activity down south be related to activity up north? Pretty simple. You draw a line right here, and that line connects the dots. That's the plate boundary. That's where all the strain builds up. That's why we have activity up and down the west coast right now, because this area of the plate is crunching and is starting to move. Someone asked me here, I actually pinned it on my last video. They were under the assumption here that these little earthquakes are relieving the strain out here across the west coast. Man, could you imagine that? Look at all these elevated earthquakes here in the last 24 hours. This is not just one area. These little quakes do nothing in terms of relieving strain. Doesn't matter if you have 1,000 smaller quakes out here on the map. They never really relieve the strain that a big one can produce. So that is a false assumption. When things are elevated like this, Doesn't it make sense here that our elevated potential of a larger quake goes up, or possibilities? I mean, it's not just one area. We're seeing a lot of earthquake areas out, or a lot of areas out here experiencing elevated earthquake activity. So the potential for a larger quake goes up because of all the movement that's happening right now. So we had these 2 earthquakes here underneath Glenn County, a series of earthquakes off the coast here of Northern California in the 4 range, bouncing back and forth here between the plate boundary here of the Pacific Plate and the Gorda Plate up north. Here's the southern end of the Cascadia megathrust area. So we're getting bouncing back and forth activity here between the two. 2 4-pointers. The last one, a 2.5 down here across the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. Let's check out the tremor map here tonight real quick. See what we have. 170 epicenters. So this would make it the second day in a row of somewhat elevated tremor activity at the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. And I believe that's leading to the earthquake activity we're seeing upstream, right? You're getting that plate being pushed down underneath this region here. The tremor activity occurs about 35, 45 kilometers deep underneath this area into the subduction zone down dip of the area, which is underneath this region. So it makes sense here when we're seeing that tremor activity. That's adding stress here back across the area of the plate boundary and the southern end of the Cascadia. No big earthquake out here yet, but we can see a partial rupture. We don't have to have a full rupture of the Cascadia, but there's partial ruptures that occur in between large events, such as, large event. Full rupture is going to be over a 9.0 across the entire length of the Cascadia if that goes. But we get these partial ruptures here across the southern end that's capable of producing up to an 8.4. So we got to watch that. It's been over 324 years since we've had a full rupture now. I think we have a higher likelihood of seeing a partial rupture than we do a full rupture, but still, that's a lot of time that has passed, and quite a bit of strain out here recently. When we see tremor activity stirring up the region around this area, we know that everything's getting pretty well compacted here, and we could see some larger scale activity soon. So watch the West Coast here, watch California. Up into the Washington area, a couple of smaller quakes here around Mount Rainier. Nothing big going on there for now. Looks like right now most of the activity is centered here across California. Had a little trail of activity leading up here across this mountain range up through Yellowstone and into Montana. You can almost track that series of earthquakes down here in a little pattern. But that's just a lot of earthquake activity here on the map, folks. Way more here on the 2.5 map than I've seen in quite a while. We got 11 earthquakes of above 2.5. That's actually kind of rare to see for a one day. So things are not just down here in Southern California. They're all across the area. Looks like the southern end of the Cascadia southward. Some movement south of the border as well. The best thing, the best advice I can give is make sure you guys have an earthquake plan out here. No doubt it's coming. It could come while I'm doing this update. It could come tomorrow. It could come in the next 20 years. I don't know if it's going to wait 20 years or not. I really don't. But the signs are pointing towards something bigger happening out here just because of the elevated activity we've seen, not only today, but in the last about 3 months or so. We've seen more elevated earthquake activity, more larger magnitudes here in the California area than we have at any time since the mid-'80s. And that's what world-renowned seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones stated live on the news program here a couple months back when we seen that elevated event. So she states there, with more earthquake activity comes the higher possibility of seeing a larger event. All right, Yellowstone National Park, nothing showing up there across that supervolcano for now. Really not seeing any type of strain or stress or any type of earthquake activity out there. I just like to double check it. There's a couple smaller quakes around the region, but hardly any of them are showing up there on the seismos. Across Texas and Oklahoma, minimal earthquake activity. I mean, 26, 23 earthquakes or so across the oil fields, nothing big. Across the Pacific here, getting a bunch of deep earthquake activity across the Kamchatka Trench. This is one of those things I think is happening right now. Which one's going to go? It almost seems like as California starts to really ramp up here, and it almost looks like we're going to have a big one, we see a large event take place here across the Western Pacific that alleviates a little bit the strain out here across the West Coast, the Eastern Pacific, which is the West Coast here. Deeper activity, obviously adding strain here across that subduction zone of the Kamchatka Trench. Had 2 earthquakes here. Some pretty deep quakes into that subduction zone today. So, going to be interesting to watch this overnight, see if anything big happens on either side of the plate. I'm thinking likely, it's 50-50 chance. Either spot could see something big. No surface activity going on there, but that's where the strain comes in, right? These deeper quakes adding strain across that area. Typical activity here across the Taiwan area southward, really nothing of abnormal movement. In fact, that's very common to see a lot of 4s out there on any given day. Papua New Guinea, a 4.4. New Zealand, 3s across North Island. Some deeper activity triggering into the Tonga Trench once again. Across the Aleutian Trench, a little bit of movement going on up here across the area. 4.3, some other earthquake activity. But if you look at it, 2.5 and above, wow, look at that. Fairly absent of earthquake activity compared to California, the more noticeable pattern of elevated seismic activity right now. Big Island out there in the middle of it all. Not seeing anything of abnormal activity yet. We are getting to a level here of inflation. Let me pull this up here real quick. Pull up the Kilauea volcano map here. I use a different browser for the Kilauea volcano because for some reason I can't. It works on the Google Chrome, but it doesn't open up the images like I want it to. What's going on here with the internet tonight? It's not my internet. Actually, it looks like it's the web servers out there with the USGS. The volcano is still currently at a yellow. The deformation data here is what I'm going to show you guys. I think we're seeing elevated earthquake activity because we are at a level, if you look here, on the past year, we are right here. This is the inflation chart, basically vertical displacement. We're at the previous levels matched in the last couple minor eruptions there across the lower. It was kind of like the Southwest Rift Zone and the Middle East Rift Zone, the latest one right there, the Middle East Rift Zone. So this is a maximum inflation followed up by a fissure event. Here we are in the last couple months going back up, and we've matched that level. So we should see something transpire here in terms of an eruption across the area soon. I think that's why we're seeing a more prominent uptick here on a broader scale across this area recently. So we'll continue to watch it, but nothing of any eruption activity yet across that area. Let's see here, Middle America Trench, fairly active, bunch of 4s and 3s in there. See over here across the Baja California area right about here, quite a few 3s stirring up there today even. So it would make sense to see elevated activity just upstream here. That includes California like we're seeing right now. South America, roughly about the same. The Atlantic Ocean, nothing major going on out there. Got a 5.6 out in Iran earlier this evening. Pretty decent sized earthquake. Looks like western areas of Iran. That was followed up about 20 minutes later by a 4.9 just off the plate boundary here. This area can definitely get some big earthquakes anywhere along the plate boundary. Can get some big earthquakes just outside Kuwait City here. To the north is where this earthquake activity is stirring up. Aside from that, looks like fairly minimal conditions across the Mediterranean for now. right, space weather activity. Looking at the UV filter array here across the eastern limb of the sun. Shows a couple different bright features, indicating sunspot, maybe of some complexity. It might harbor some potential for some flaring. We'll have to watch that. Kind of hard to tell, though, since I don't have my typical magnetogram image. I'm going to miss that. I hope that comes back here. So we have to deal with the kind of the black and white image here. I don't even know if this is recent. No, this is from the 26th as well. So I guess the most recent one's going to be this one. It's just hard to tell, on complexity status here. But there is an area out there. I believe it's 39. I don't even know if they've named it yet. Let me see here. I guess it's 3916, 3917 here. A couple regional sunspots that have been showing a little bit of uptick. I don't know what that is on the sun right there. Look at that. What is that? What is that? Is that, looks like a little pinhole. There's one right here as well. I don't know if that's normal or natural, but that looks a little odd. Huh. May just have something to do with the, just that imagery, I guess. We'll check it maybe. Oh, we can check the movie and see what's going on. Well, this is a different type of imagery here. Be hard to tell. A pinhole on this image. Anyway, yeah, kind of interesting to say the least. Let's go back down here in size a little bit. Overall threat right now for flaring remains at 5% chance. M flare at 30. C flare at 99% chance. No major roars in the forecast here for now, folks. Severe weather, non-existent. Just some thunderstorm activity out there across Texas and portions of Louisiana there over the next couple days. As far as any major weather patterns go, well, there's a massive low pressure up here across the Great Lakes area northward, bringing with it quite a bit of more lake effect snow out there. That moves on out of here, and as we head towards the weekend, looks like maybe another little stream comes up north here and hits the northeast with some cold air, some snow, some moisture heading down here across portions of the south as we into early next week. So these guys have been dealing with some drought conditions. Going to be getting a little bit of appreciated moisture out there. After that, maybe I like that. I'm hopeful we get a return of the wetter pattern out here across California. I know we've had 2 or 3 days of some decent rainfall here recently. We picked up about 7 inches of rainfall, which is pretty good for a couple days total. But the ground is starting to crack again out here in Northern California, so we need more rain. This is our rainy season. We're supposed to have rain. We're not supposed to have 70 degrees and sunshine. If you want that, head down to Southern California. But here in Northern California, we're supposed to have rain. It looks like we may get some as we head into next weekend. That's a ways out, but I'm hopeful that that will be Merry Christmas to me. That's nice. I'll take some rain. That looks decent here a little bit later into December. Hopefully that stays on the forecast menu. All right, folks, so with elevated earthquake activity out here today, just be on guard. Anything can happen at any given time out here. It's not just one area. It's all across the West Coast. And when things get like this, anywhere can pop. So just be on guard. Stay safe. If anything happens overnight while we're sleeping, I guess we'll know about it, right? Make sure you have the early alert system on. Let me... It's called Shake Alert or My Shake. That is the an app that you can use for your phone, Android, iPhone, that sets up proximity, your location, and gives you an early notification of an earthquake. I've had it go off a couple times here. It gives you, some people say, a couple seconds maybe a little bit longer, depending on magnitude and location. And it sends off a little warning in the middle of the night. I've had it go off when my phone was on silent in the middle of the night. And it sounds something like this. I'll let you guys hear it.
Earthquake. Drop, cover, hold on, shaking expected. Earthquake. Drop, cover, hold on, shaking expected.
And that's it. So it's kind of neat. It gives you a heads up if you're, maybe about ready to experience a decent earthquake. Gives you time to say, okay, let's get up, get out, or maybe grab your glasses and your phone or something, but it's well worth it to have it on your phone. It doesn't take up a lot of space, doesn't use up a lot of your battery. It's called MyShake, and you can find it there on the, your mobile device app store. Well worth it. You just got to go through and set up the settings and your location and whatnot, add the permissions for location, and you're set. I would suggest all of us have it on our phone. Definitely beneficial in these times right now. All right, quick glance here at the seismograph stations. It looks like there's a couple more smaller quakes there in the China Lake area. You guys see that? These little spikes on the graph. Those are earthquakes, smaller ones than what we've seen just a short time ago here. That 3-pointer and the 2-pointer. But there is some other smaller quake activity out here, indicative of the strain that's continuing to build out here across the West Coast. So we'll see you guys back out here in the morning, unless something major happens overnight. Have a good one. Stay safe out there. Make sure you guys download that app. It's well worth it. It's free. We'll see you guys back out here in the morning. Stay safe.